people always preach that blood is thicker than water, completely forgetting that venom is too. When you bleed to build a home, your so-called family will see it as a free meal. This is exactly how I shattered our perfect facade, throwing my brother and manipulative mother into the black hole they dug for me. If you expect any forgiveness, stop listening right now. The ending only reeks of cold justice and the ruin of parasites. Welcome back to Haley Revenge Stories, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us with zero budget to keep the lights on and pay our hardworking team. If you enjoyed today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or clicking the link in the description and pinned comment, so we can keep bringing you these daily stories. I am Brooklyn Perry. I sacrificed my entire 20s to the blinding glow of computer monitors and the sterile hum of corporate server rooms. While other people my age were out traveling the world and making careless memories, I was pulling all-nighters at Etheria Solutions, a massive tech conglomerate that demanded your soul in exchange for a hefty paycheck. But the ruthless grind paid off. By the time I hit 30, I had saved enough cash to buy a rock-solid, beautiful detached house in the quiet suburbs of Denver, Colorado. It was my sanctuary. I paid every single cent of that massive down payment with my own blood, sweat, and tears. I had zero financial handouts and absolutely no safety nets to fall back on. That harsh reality stands in stark contrast to the life of my younger brother, Caleb. Caleb was the undisputed golden child, born with a silver spoon lodged so far down his throat, it is a medical miracle he could breathe. Our mother, Evelyn, is a woman whose entire existence revolves around her country club status, designer handbags, and maintaining the grand illusion of a perfect, wealthy family to impress her judgmental friends. Because of this toxic obsession with appearances, she enabled Caleb's every single destructive move. When Caleb dropped out of his university because the professors were quote-unquote too demanding, Evelyn simply patted his back and paid the rent for a luxury downtown apartment so he could take a year off to find himself. Finding himself apparently meant attending endless fraternity parties and racking up premium bar tabs every weekend. Recently, Caleb decided he was a visionary financial genius and launched a cryptocurrency startup. Spoiler alert, he is not a genius at all. He drove that company straight into a brick wall in less than 18 months. The bankruptcy was a spectacular disaster. Instead of paying his dedicated employees or investing in secure network infrastructure, my brilliant brother blew the venture capital funding on leasing 2 exotic supercars and buying exclusive VIP bottle service at high-end nightclubs. Then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just walked through my front door, utterly exhausted after a brutal 14-hour shift managing a software deployment. The phone rang, and Evelyn's name flashed brightly on the screen. I answered, expecting the usual boring complaints about the dry weather or her nosy neighbors. Instead, I received a royal decree. "Brooklyn, sweetheart," Evelyn began. Her voice dripped with that fake, syrupy sweetness she always uses right before she asks for something completely outrageous. "Caleb is going through a tiny rough patch right now. The economy is just terrible for young entrepreneurs, you know. So he and Sloan will be moving into your second floor for a few months." Sloan, Caleb's high-maintenance fiancé who treated retail workers like garbage and always looked at me like I was dirt stuck to the bottom of her designer shoes. "Excuse me?" I asked, gripping the cold kitchen counter. "They are doing what?" "It is only temporary," Evelyn continued, completely ignoring the sharp, warning edge in my tone. "Just until they save up enough cash for their destination wedding in the Bahamas. It is the perfect solution. You have all that empty space up there, and blood is thicker than water. Family helps family, Brooklyn. You need to have the 2 guest rooms cleared out by the weekend so they can bring their furniture over." The sheer audacity of her statement physically knocked the wind out of my lungs. She did not ask me. She demanded it. She was eagerly offering up my hard-earned home as a free sacrifice at the altar of Caleb's incompetence. No, I said. My voice was completely flat, stripped of any familial warmth or emotion. I am sorry. What did you say? Evelyn gasped. She sounded genuinely shocked that I dared to refuse her direct command. I said no, Mother. I am not clearing out my guest rooms. Caleb and Sloane are not moving in. Not for a few months, not for a few days, and not for a single night. Brooklyn Perry, how can you be so incredibly selfish and cruel? Evelyn's voice skyrocketed an octave, her polite country club facade shattering into a million pieces instantly. Your brother is in a severe crisis. He has nowhere else to go. He needs a secure roof over his head. He is a grown adult man who bankrupted an entire company to buy sports cars, I shot back, my patience completely evaporating into thin air. I am not a charity bailout fund for his stupid financial decisions. He can go get a real job at a grocery store and rent a cheap studio apartment like everyone else does when they go broke. My house is not a free hotel for failures. I hung up the phone before she could start screaming her lungs out. I fully expected an immediate barrage of hateful text messages, or maybe Caleb calling to throw a massive temper tantrum. Instead, there was nothing. Total, absolute silence. One entire week passed without a single word from Evelyn, Caleb, or anyone else in our extended family tree. There were no passive-aggressive posts on social media. There were no missed calls. There were no unhinged voicemails left in the middle of the night. It was a dead, suffocating quiet that made the tiny hairs on the back of my neck stand straight up. But growing up in the same house as Evelyn had taught me one crucial survival skill. Her silence never meant she had realized she was wrong or that she had surrendered. It meant she was actively planning her next move. It was the eerie, terrifying calm before a massive storm, and I knew deep down in my bones that they were coming for my sanctuary. I returned home late on a Friday evening after a grueling 72-hour business trip to Seattle. My entire body ached from back-to-back corporate meetings, and all I desperately wanted was a hot shower and my quiet, empty bed. As the hired driver turned the car onto my usually peaceful street, my exhausted brain completely failed to process the chaotic scene unfolding ahead. My sanctuary was blazing with brilliant light from every single window. The wide concrete driveway was completely blocked by a massive catering van. But the true horror was my immaculate, carefully landscaped front yard. At least 24 luxury sedans and massive sports utility vehicles were parked aggressively across my property. Heavy, muddy tire tracks, easily 6 inches deep, tore through the expensive green grass I had spent thousands of dollars maintaining. My blood turned to absolute ice in my veins. I paid the driver, tightly gripped the handle of my heavy suitcase, and marched toward the front door. The heavy, thumping bass of obnoxious club music vibrated through the solid oak wood of my home. The front door was completely unlocked, swinging slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped into a living, breathing nightmare. My minimalist, pristine living room had been completely hijacked. Cheap, overly fragrant floral arrangements covered my expensive mahogany dining table. A massive catered buffet, complete with a flowing chocolate fountain, spilled over my custom marble kitchen island. Drops of dark chocolate were already splattered across the white cabinets. Dozens of strangers in overpriced cocktail dresses and tailored suits stood around, carelessly spilling red wine and greasy appetizers onto my imported rugs. I stood completely frozen in the entryway, trying to calculate how this illegal invasion was even physically possible. Then, I spotted my dog walker, a sweet 19-year-old college student named Maya. She was nervously backed into a corner near the coats, looking terrified. It hit me like a speeding freight train. Evelyn and Caleb had tracked her down. They must have ambushed her, spun a massive lie about a surprise family gathering, and pressured the young, naive teenager into handing over the emergency spare key I had entrusted to her. They exploited a kid to break into my secure home. Before I could even open my mouth to scream, the terrible dance music faded into silence. The sharp clinking of a silver spoon against a crystal glass cut through the loud chatter of the room. Standing on the bottom step of my handcrafted wooden staircase was Evelyn. She wore a sparkling emerald gown, beaming proudly like she had just won a prestigious global award. Right beside her stood Caleb in a sharp velvet tuxedo. He was grinning smugly, looking incredibly pleased with himself, with his arm wrapped tightly around Sloane. Sloane was draped in a ridiculous white silk dress and flashing a massive diamond ring that was undoubtedly purchased on high-interest credit. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed family and beloved friends," Evelyn announced loudly, raising her expensive champagne flute high into the air. "Thank you all for gathering here tonight to celebrate the beautiful, magical engagement of my wonderful son Caleb and the gorgeous Sloane. We all know the economy is incredibly unforgiving right now for bright young entrepreneurs, but family is the ultimate, unbreakable anchor." She paused dynamically, placing a dramatic hand over her chest to milk the crowd for sympathy. "That is why I am incredibly thrilled and deeply moved to officially announce to all of you that Caleb and Sloane will be moving into this massive, gorgeous house as they prepare for their lavish destination wedding. This incredibly generous gift comes straight from the heart of Caleb's older sister, Brooklyn, who practically insisted they take over her entire second floor so they can start their new life together without a single financial worry in the world." The ignorant crowd erupted into thunderous, enthusiastic applause. People raised their glasses high. Someone cheered loudly from the back of the room. I watched, sick to my stomach, as Caleb kissed Sloane's cheek, basking in the absolute glory of a bold-faced, disgusting lie. They were literally stealing my property and claiming it as a hard-won victory prize right in front of a live audience of their snobby upper-middle-class friends. I did not cry. I did not throw a hysterical emotional fit. A cold, sharp, and terrifying clarity washed over my brain, shutting down all my fatigue. I dropped the handle of my suitcase, letting it slam heavily against the floorboards. I ignored the confused stares of the few guests standing near the entryway and walked with terrifying robotic purpose straight down the main hallway toward the utility closet. I yanked open the heavy metal door, stared directly at the main electrical panel, and firmly gripped the primary circuit breaker. Without a single ounce of hesitation, I pulled it down hard. Instantly, the entire 3,000-square-foot house went completely pitch black. The loud chatter and cheering immediately morphed into confused gasps, nervous laughter, and frightened murmurs. I reached into the utility shelf where I kept my emergency storm supplies and grabbed the heavy-duty, battery-powered megaphone I had purchased 2 years ago for a neighborhood watch event. I clicked the power button. A sharp, ear-piercing electronic feedback shrieked through the dark living room, forcing several guests to cry out and cover their ears. "Attention!" I projected through the megaphone, my voice booming off the walls like an angry, unforgiving god. "This illegal party is officially over. Every single person standing inside this house is currently trespassing on private property. You have exactly 10 minutes to grab your coats, get your vehicles off my ruined lawn, and drive away. At the 9-minute and 59-second mark, I am calling the police and having every single person remaining on this property arrested for breaking and entering." Complete chaos erupted. Someone illuminated their smartphone flashlight, pointing the blinding beam directly at my face. Evelyn shrieked hysterically from the staircase. "Brooklyn? What on earth are you doing? Turn the lights back on this instant. You are embarrassing us in front of the entire country club. We have important guests here." Next to her, Sloane began stomping her high heels furiously against my hardwood floors like a spoiled toddler. "Are you completely insane?" Sloane screamed, her voice shrill and echoing aggressively in the dark hallway. "This is my special engagement night. You are ruining everything. Somebody bumped into me when the lights went out, and I spilled dark red wine all over my $2,000 silk dress. You are going to pay for this, you absolute psycho." Caleb angrily let go of his shrieking fiancée. His face, illuminated in the harsh, scattered beams of the phone flashlights, was twisted with pure, unfiltered rage. His fake, charming golden boy facade was completely shattered. He aggressively pushed past a group of terrified guests, charging directly at me through the darkness like an enraged bull. "You miserable, jealous witch!" he snarled viciously, raising his fists. He lunged forward, aiming to violently rip the heavy megaphone from my hand and smash my smartphone into the ground, but I had spent my entire childhood dodging his violent, entitled temper tantrums. I quickly stepped backward, pivoting on my heel, allowing his reckless momentum to carry him right past me. He stumbled awkwardly and crashed hard into the hallway wall. I did not waste a single millisecond. I pulled my phone from my pocket, unlocked the glowing screen, and quickly punched in 911. I hit the speakerphone button and turned the volume all the way up so the entire shocked room could hear the operator answer. 911? What is your exact emergency? The calm, professional dispatcher asked loudly into the quiet room. Yes, I said, my voice completely steady, staring dead into Caleb's panicked, wide eyes. I need multiple police officers at my address immediately. I have a massive home invasion currently in progress, and the intruders are becoming violent. The flashing red and blue lights of 3 patrol cruisers tore through the darkness of my neighborhood exactly 4 minutes and 20 seconds after I ended the call. The arrogant guests, who just moments ago were happily drinking my stolen wine, suddenly scattered like cockroaches scrambling from a sudden flashlight beam. They tripped over my ruined lawn, desperately trying to start their expensive engines before the police officers could block the long driveway. But Caleb did not run. His fragile ego was far too bruised to retreat. When 2 heavily armed, uniformed officers stepped through my front door and swept their heavy flashlights across the darkened hallway, Caleb aggressively marched right up to them. He actually tried to dictate the situation, puffing out his chest in his ridiculous velvet tuxedo. "Officers, you need to arrest this hysterical woman," Caleb barked, pointing a shaking, furious finger directly at my face. "She is having a massive psychotic episode and trying to ruin my private engagement party. This is my permanent residence." The older officer took one look at me holding the official property deed I had calmly pulled up on my phone screen, then looked dead back at Caleb. "Sir, I need you to step outside immediately. You are criminally trespassing." Caleb completely lost his mind. Accustomed to a lifetime of our mother shielding him from any real-world consequences, he made the absolute biggest mistake of his completely useless life. He forcefully shoved the officer squarely in the chest, yelling that he was a vital startup founder and they had absolutely no right to touch him. The officers did not care about his imaginary wealth. In less than 3 seconds, Caleb was slammed face first against the cold drywall of my hallway. The sharp metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs echoing through the quiet house was the most satisfying music I had ever heard. He was dragged out to the back of a squad car, screaming violent threats and cursing the police department, earning himself additional felony charges for resisting arrest and threatening an officer of the law. By midnight, my house was finally empty, but the digital war had just begun. As I was scrubbing dried chocolate off my marble kitchen island, my phone began vibrating relentlessly off the counter. Evelyn had unleashed her ultimate weapon, launching a vicious, calculating smear campaign on Facebook. She posted a massive, dramatic essay complete with crying emojis, claiming I had suffered a severe mental breakdown. She spun a pathetic, fictional narrative that I was deeply pathologically jealous of Caleb finding true love because I was a bitter, lonely workaholic. She painted herself as the tragic, heartbroken mother simply trying to keep her family intact, while her demonic daughter destroyed everything. Within 60 minutes, the flying monkeys descended. My notifications exploded with hundreds of abusive text messages, angry voicemails, and aggressive social media tags from aunts, uncles, and distant cousins. These were relatives who had not bothered to call me on my birthday in over a decade. These were people who had never contributed a single red cent to my college tuition or my mortgage payments. Yet suddenly, they were all self-righteous experts on family loyalty. My Uncle Robert sent a furious voice note stating I was a disgusting disgrace to the family name and needed to apologize on my bare knees. My Aunt Brenda texted a long, unhinged paragraph demanding I immediately drop the police charges and buy Caleb a new luxury watch to compensate for his deep emotional trauma. They preached endlessly about how I needed to bleed myself dry for the sake of blood relations, all while comfortably sitting in their own homes, doing absolutely nothing to actually house or fund him themselves. I did not type a single word in response. I did not waste my breath arguing with a flock of loud vultures. Instead, at exactly 7 in the morning, I called my corporate manager and requested a 24-hour personal leave of absence. I had a fortress to build. By 9 in the morning, a premium commercial security team was parked in my driveway. I paid them a massive premium fee to completely rip out every single traditional deadbolt and lock on my property. They installed military-grade, biometric smart doors that required my specific thumbprint and retinal scan to unlock. But I did not stop there. I had them wire a hidden, airtight network of infrared security cameras covering every square inch of my property perimeter. These cameras had thermal imaging, motion tracking, and night vision capabilities that beamed a direct, encrypted feed straight to a private server in my basement. If a stray leaf blew across my lawn, I would get a high-definition notification. At noon, I walked into the sleek downtown office of a ruthless property attorney I knew through my tech corporate connections. I handed him a very generous retainer fee and gave him one simple, cold instruction. By 3 in the afternoon, a licensed process server was knocking on the heavy glass doors of my mother's exclusive country club where she was having a lavish lunch. The server publicly handed Evelyn and the recently bailed-out Caleb a thick stack of terrifying legal documents in front of all her snobby friends. It was an aggressive, ironclad cease-and-desist order, meticulously detailing their defamation, digital harassment, and physical property damage. Attached to it was a formal, legally binding criminal trespass warning. The language was entirely stripped of any familial sentiment. It explicitly stated that if Evelyn, Caleb, Sloan, or any of their associated flying monkeys stepped a single foot onto my property line or attempted to contact me through any medium whatsoever, I would immediately press federal harassment charges. There would be no warnings, no tearful family meetings, and absolutely zero hesitation. The penalty would be immediate, guaranteed jail time. I had drawn my steel boundary, and I was silently daring them to cross it. Exactly 1 week passed in total, suffocating silence. The digital harassment from my extended relatives had completely dried up the second my lawyer delivered the legal threats. But the heavy feeling of being hunted never left my chest. My instincts screamed that the war was far from over. At exactly 4 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, my encrypted smartphone vibrated violently against my nightstand. I jolted awake, my heart slamming against my ribs. I snatched the device and opened the secure security application. The thermal imaging camera mounted above my garage had detected a human heat signature. I zoomed in on the high-definition infrared feed. A tall figure dressed in completely black clothing, with a heavy hood pulled tight over their head and a dark medical mask covering their lower face, was creeping across my front walkway. The intruder bypassed the heavy biometric doors entirely and headed straight for the side of the house where the municipal trash bins were kept. I watched in absolute disgust as the figure began systematically pulling garbage bags out, slicing them open with a pocket knife, and sifting through the messy contents. They were not looking for valuables. They were meticulously flattening out crumpled pieces of paper and shining a small penlight over them. When the trash yielded nothing useful, the figure moved to my heavy-duty steel mailbox near the curb, violently yanking on the locked handle, trying to pry it open. As the figure wrestled with the metal box, the hood slipped back just an inch. The infrared camera caught the distinct profile and the panicked, frantic eyes. It was Caleb. He was not trying to break in to attack me. He was hunting for documents. Specifically, he was hunting for bank statements, utility bills, and tax return letters. A cold chill swept down my spine. This was no longer just an arrogant brother throwing a temper tantrum over being denied a free place to live. This was highly calculated. This was desperate. The second the sun rose, I drove straight to the heavily fortified campus of Etheria Solutions. I bypassed my own office and walked directly down to the basement levels where our elite cybersecurity division operated. I pulled aside a trusted senior network analyst who owed me a massive favor from a previous project. I handed him my social security number, my banking routing details, and my primary property identification codes. Run a complete, untraceable sweep on every single piece of data connected to my identity, I told him, keeping my voice completely steady despite the dread twisting my stomach. Check the major credit bureaus, check the dark web registries, and look for any pending loan applications. It took exactly 3 hours for the heavily encrypted servers to compile the data. When the analyst finally called me over to his glowing monitors, all the color instantly drained from my face. The absolute horrifying truth behind the entire family drama was suddenly displayed in bright white text against a black screen. Caleb was not just a failed startup founder who lost a few investments because of bad management. His cryptocurrency company had been a massive, illegal Ponzi scheme. When the venture capital money dried up, my brother had grown desperate to keep up his luxurious playboy lifestyle. He had turned to an underground, highly organized financial crime syndicate, taking out a massive, unrecorded loan on the black market. The interest rates were astronomical, and the lenders were not the type of people who took people to civil court when they defaulted. They were the type of people who broke bones and made individuals disappear permanently. Caleb owed them over $500,000, and the final payment deadline was rapidly approaching. The puzzle pieces snapped together with sickening clarity. Evelyn and Caleb never wanted to just sleep in my spare bedrooms. They needed to establish a legal residency at my exact physical address. They needed access to my mailbox to intercept the physical verification letters. They needed my discarded utility bills to forge identity documents. Their ultimate sinister goal was to assume my financial identity, use my flawless credit score, and secretly take out a massive second mortgage against my fully paid-off home. They were planning to cash out the equity I had bled for, hand the stolen cash over to the violent syndicate to clear Caleb's debts, and then immediately flee the state, leaving me to face bankruptcy and total financial ruin. My own mother was willing to completely destroy my entire life just to save her golden boy from the terrifying consequences of his own criminal actions. The betrayal was so deep, so unfathomably evil, that it bypassed sadness entirely and mutated into pure, concentrated rage. There would be absolutely no mercy. I was going to burn their entire operation to the ground. Sitting right there in the cybersecurity lab, I picked up my phone and called the fraud departments of all 3 major national credit bureaus. I initiated an absolute ironclad security freeze on my social security number and all associated accounts. Nobody could open a single credit card or loan under my name without an impossible series of multi-factor authentications. Next, I compiled everything. I took the high-definition infrared footage of Caleb attempting to burglarize my mailbox. I took the massive stack of digital evidence the cybersecurity team had pulled, showing the dark web loan inquiries and the falsified property application drafts that trace straight back to the Internet Protocol address of Evelyn's current apartment. I printed every single page, placed the documents into a thick, waterproof binder, and securely copied the videos onto a heavy metal flash drive. I skipped my afternoon meetings and drove directly to the regional field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in downtown Denver. I did not bother with local police this time. This was federal wire fraud, conspiracy to commit identity theft, and criminal association with a known crime syndicate. I walked through the heavy security scanners, approached the front desk, and calmly handed the thick binder to the intake agent. I was no longer just locking my doors. I was locking them in a cage. The clock hanging on my kitchen wall ticked past 11:45 at night. A heavy, relentless rain was violently lashing against the thick glass of my living room windows, washing the quiet Denver suburbs in cold, unforgiving gray shadows. I was sitting entirely alone in the dark, bathed only in the pale blue glow of my advanced security monitors. Ever since my visit to the Federal Bureau, I had not slept for more than 2 hours at a time. I knew the black market syndicate was rapidly running out of patience, and Caleb, trapped in a corner like a desperate rat, would inevitably play his final, most dangerous card. He would point the monsters directly at my front door to save himself. At exactly 11:55, the perimeter sensors triggered a silent, flashing red alert across all 3 of my main computer screens. The thermal imaging cameras mounted high above the street captured 2 large matte black utility vans killing their headlights and rolling silently to a stop right at the edge of my ruined front lawn. The heavy side doors slid open. 5 massive figures stepped out into the freezing rain. They were not dressed like amateur street burglars. They moved with terrifying, practiced military precision. The infrared feed easily picked up the distinct, heavy shapes of tactical firearms hidden underneath their thick leather jackets, along with heavy steel crowbars and industrial breaching tools. Caleb had actually done it. He had given a violent, organized crime syndicate my home address, falsely promising them that the property was legally his or that the money he owed was locked safely inside my walls. They fanned out, their heavy boots crushing the wet grass, communicating through subtle, professional hand signals as they approached my front porch and side garage doors. They thought they were sneaking up on an easy target, assuming they were hunting a vulnerable woman living completely alone in a quiet, defenseless suburban home. They had absolutely no idea they were walking straight into a high-tech fortress designed by a paranoid, wealthy tech executive. I did not panic. My heart rate barely elevated. I simply reached forward and pressed the glowing red icon firmly on my master control tablet. The custom defense protocol I had programmed activated instantly. With a deafening mechanical roar that physically shook the hardwood floorboards, heavy-duty, reinforced steel rolling shutters violently dropped from hidden compartments above every single window and exterior door. Thick steel slammed into solid concrete tracks with loud metallic clangs, completely sealing the entire house shut in less than 4 seconds. The armed intruders froze in absolute shock as the beautiful home suddenly transformed into an impenetrable, solid steel box right before their eyes. Before they could even process the trap, my security system initiated Phase 2. Blinding, high-intensity strobe lights mounted under the eaves began flashing violently, instantly disorienting the armed men in the darkness. A pre-recorded, automated voice boomed from the exterior heavy-duty speakers, announcing that lethal force defenses were fully active and law enforcement was already heavily deployed. Simultaneously, the smart system triggered an emergency. Priority 1 distress signal directly to the Special Weapons and Tactics Division of the Denver Police Department, transmitting the live infrared video feed of the armed hostiles directly to their dispatch screens. The thugs panicked instantly. The leader shouted something lost in the heavy rain, and they scrambled desperately to retreat to their parked vans. But they had severely underestimated the response time for an active, heavily armed home invasion in an exclusive, wealthy suburb. Less than 3 minutes later, the quiet street erupted into a chaotic war zone. Massive armored tactical vehicles tore around the corner, their sirens screaming and blinding blue lights piercing the heavy rain. Dozens of heavily armored tactical officers poured out onto the street, assault rifles raised and laser sights locked on targets, shouting deafening commands. They ordered the men to drop their weapons and get face down in the dirt immediately. The syndicate enforcers, realizing they were completely outgunned and surrounded by dozens of federal and state officers, immediately dropped their firearms and collapsed onto the muddy grass. I watched the entire flawless execution through my monitors as the officers roughly secured their hands with thick plastic zip ties. The men were dragged to their feet, completely soaked, humiliated, and defeated. These men were hardened criminals, but there is zero honor among thieves. When the lead tactical detective pulled the gang leader aside, promising him a massive federal terrorism and organized crime charge if he did not cooperate immediately, the thug flipped faster than a cheap coin. Hoping to trade information for a lighter prison sentence, the enforcer confessed everything right there on my ruined lawn. He loudly gave up the exact location where Caleb had been hiding for the past 48 hours. It was not a luxury downtown apartment. It was not a lavish resort. Evelyn, having completely drained her own bank accounts and maxed out her remaining credit cards to keep Caleb out of jail the first time, had secretly rented a filthy, roach-infested motel room in the most dangerous, rundown industrial district on the far east side of the city. The tactical teams did not waste a single second. They left 2 cruisers behind to secure my property and immediately dispatched a massive strike force straight to the motel. What happened next was a spectacular chain reaction of betrayal that I only learned about later from the official police reports, but it played out exactly like a cheap, tragic cinema script. When the heavy sirens began wailing down the broken streets of the industrial district, slowly surrounding the cheap, deteriorating motel, absolute panic erupted inside Caleb's tiny room. Sloane, his incredibly materialistic and fiercely selfish fiancée, looked out the dirty window and saw the red and blue lights reflecting off the broken pavement. She instantly realized the luxurious fairy tale was permanently over. There would be no destination wedding, no mansions, and no endless credit cards. While Caleb was frantically trying to barricade the flimsy wooden door with a broken, rotting dresser, crying and screaming in total terror, Sloane made her final, most ruthless move. She did not stand by her man. Instead, she unzipped Evelyn's expensive leather travel bag sitting on the filthy mattress. Inside was Evelyn's most prized possession, a heavy velvet box containing over a century of expensive, irreplaceable family heirloom jewelry that Evelyn had foolishly brought along, planning to pawn the vintage diamond necklaces and pearl earrings if the situation got worse. Sloane snatched the heavy velvet box, shoved it deep into her designer purse, slipped out the tiny back bathroom window, and sprinted through the dark, rainy alleyways. By the time the tactical team kicked the motel door completely off its hinges and threw Caleb aggressively to the dirty carpet, Sloane was already sitting in the back of a stolen taxi. She was heading straight to the international airport to catch a red-eye flight out of the state, happily leaving her supposed soulmate to rot in a federal cage. My encrypted phone began ringing exactly at 3 a.m. I stared coldly at the bright screen. It was Evelyn. She had obviously just received the horrifying phone call from the county precinct. I slowly picked up the device and pressed the green answer button, putting her on speakerphone so her voice would fill the empty room. "Brooklyn!" Evelyn shrieked, her voice completely destroyed, choking on violent, hysterical sobs. She sounded exactly like a wild animal caught in a brutal steel trap. "Brooklyn, you have to help us. They took him. Heavily armed police kicked the door down and arrested your brother. They are charging him with federal wire fraud, identity theft, and organized crime association. The judge set the bail at $200,000 in cash. $200,000. I sat perfectly still, letting her panicked screams echo through my quiet, secure kitchen. "I have absolutely nothing left," Evelyn cried, her voice cracking with pure, unadulterated desperation. "Sloane stole the family diamonds. She took everything and vanished into thin air. My credit is completely destroyed. Brooklyn, listen to me. You have a fully paid-off house. You need to drive to the bank the very second they open and take out a massive mortgage loan. You have to wire the cash to the courthouse. He is your own flesh and blood. If he goes to federal prison, those men will kill him. You have to save your brother." She was panting in panic, begging and demanding that I sacrifice everything I've built merely to shelter her precious, criminal son for another few days. A crushing silence dragged out between us for 5 agonizing seconds. My mind flashed to the relentless 14-hour workdays, to the drained bank accounts of my youth, to the armed men who had just stood in my front yard, ready to physically ruin me simply because Caleb had pointed them my way. I leaned forward toward the microphone, my voice dropping to a terrifying absolute zero. "My lawyer will send you the bill for the grass," I said. I pressed the red button and ended the call forever. The wheels of federal justice grind incredibly slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. It took 8 grueling months of endless court hearings, exhausting legal depositions, and massive mountains of irrefutable digital evidence provided by the Federal Cybercrimes Unit. But the final verdict was an absolute masterpiece of accountability. Caleb stood in that sterile courtroom, stripped of his custom velvet tuxedos and designer luxury watches, wearing a cheap, oversized orange jumpsuit. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for entitled white-collar criminals, slammed her heavy wooden gavel down with a resounding crack that echoed through the quiet room. She sentenced my brother to exactly 5 full years in a federal penitentiary, without the slightest possibility of early parole, for multiple counts of aggravated identity theft, massive financial wire fraud, and direct criminal conspiracy with a known organized crime syndicate. He looked back at the gallery, his face pale and terrified, searching for someone to save him one last time. I sat in the very back row, my face a mask of cold stone, and gave him absolutely nothing. Evelyn's spectacular downfall was even more poetic because it was entirely self-inflicted. After maxing out every single credit card she owned and draining her retirement accounts to pay for Caleb's high-priced defense attorneys, the massive mountain of debt finally crushed her. The bank aggressively foreclosed on her ridiculous, sprawling mansion. I drove past her old neighborhood once, purely out of curiosity, and saw a massive foreclosure auction sign hammered right into her perfectly manicured front lawn. The country club friends she had spent decades desperately trying to impress instantly turned their backs on her, treating her sudden bankruptcy like a highly contagious disease. With absolutely zero assets left to her name, Evelyn was forcefully evicted and had to quietly relocate to a cramped, poorly maintained, low-rent apartment complex on the industrial outskirts of the city. Her grand illusion of superiority had completely evaporated into thin air. Of course, misery constantly searches for company. With her golden boy locked away behind heavy steel bars and her bank accounts completely empty, Evelyn turned her desperate sights on the extended family. The exact same flock of flying monkeys who had previously bombarded my phone, aggressively preaching about the sacred duties of blood loyalty and family sacrifice, suddenly found themselves on the receiving end of Evelyn's relentless begging. She called my aunts, my uncles, and those distant cousins every single day, sobbing and demanding emergency cash loans to pay her electricity bills and buy overpriced commissary items for Caleb. Suddenly, the harsh reality of her toxic parasitism was no longer a fun, dramatic story to gossip about on social media. It was actively draining their own wallets. In a hilarious twist of pure irony, my phone started buzzing again. It was the relatives. They sent me long, pathetic text messages, trying to awkwardly apologize and claiming they finally understood exactly what I had been dealing with all these years. My Uncle Robert even left a long voicemail saying he missed his favorite niece and wanted to take me out for a nice steak dinner to catch up. They were desperately trying to flatter me, hoping I would step back in and take the heavy financial burden of Evelyn off their shoulders. I did not block them. I simply left every single message on read. I let them stare at that tiny digital read receipt, forcing them to swallow the bitter, permanent silence of my absolute indifference. That brings me to this very morning. It is a beautiful, completely quiet Sunday. The soft golden sunlight is pouring through the massive windows of my secure, peaceful living room. There are no shrieking demands, no passive-aggressive insults, and absolutely no terrifying midnight visits from violent loan sharks. I am sitting on my expensive leather couch, drinking a perfectly brewed cup of dark roast coffee, and looking at my glowing laptop screen. An official corporate email from the executive board of Etheria Solutions just arrived in my inbox. Effective the first day of next month, I am officially being promoted to the highly coveted position of Regional Director of Operations, complete with a massive base salary increase and comprehensive executive stock options. My sanctuary is completely safe. My professional career is thriving beyond my wildest dreams, and my mind is entirely at peace. People love to romanticize the concept of family, but the absolute truth is far more brutal. There are family trees that have rotted completely from the roots up, poisoning everything they touch. The only way to survive is not to blindly pour your own water on them, hoping they will suddenly bloom. The only way to survive is to pick up a heavy, sharp saw and cut them down entirely, finally clearing the sky to let in the warm, healing sunlight. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to my story today. Where in the world are you listening from right now? I would love to know. If you found today's story entertaining and satisfying, please consider supporting the channel with just $1. You can easily help us by scanning the PayPal QR code directly on your screen or by clicking the secure PayPal link located in the video description or the pinned comment. Your generous support is the only way we can pay our incredibly hardworking staff, help them feed their families, and keep bringing you more amazing, high-quality stories every single day. Stay strong, protect your peace, and never let anyone steal your light.